Okay, so today we will talk about one of the also extremely influential and interesting parts of Aristotle's theory, ethics. Ethical theory, and in the end a bit about politics. Very interesting because it had a lot of influence, and it's actually today, like I mentioned last time, today for us Aristotelian ethics is considered important part of modern ethical theory. Although not exactly in the way he thought about it, but it has similar essence. And one of the reasons is he thinks about it in very practical terms and doesn't connect it to religion in any way. He does not connect it to this deity. There's a little bit of that, but he looks at it from the same point of view we might look at it. So what's going on? It's based on a couple of his works, actually. Nicomachean Ethics is the most famous one. Nicomachus was his son. And we think he dedicated it to his son. That's why it's called Nicomachean. Although that's a speculation, because he never specifically said anything about that. There is another work, Eudemian Ethics, which is similar to that, but probably written earlier. This one is probably a later one, and it is, again, his lecture notes. It's not specifically a book for general public, but lecture notes based on his lectures, which he was giving to primarily young men of noble background, future leaders. He was educating them how to be a leader, how to be a virtuous person and good politician, and so on. So there is a lot of interesting stuff there. The science of the correct conduct that guides us towards the goal of achieving human excellence. Remember the word arete? So that's the idea. How to get this arete. And to Aristotle, this is actually objective knowledge. It is something that we can know, but not as abstract as mathematics. You do need to obtain this knowledge to actually practice it, to do something. It's more like riding a bicycle, right? Can you learn how to ride a bicycle by somebody just explaining it to you? No. Unless you actually try it, you can have all the explanation you want, and then you're going to get on a bicycle and collapse. You need to try it, you need to fall a few times, and then you'll learn. So similarly with ethics, Aristotle says that you cannot just explain it, but nonetheless, if you already have, like all of us have some experience of dealing with these ethical matters, and if you have some experience, it actually is very helpful to also have somebody explain to you some of the theory behind them, so you could get a better grasp of what is going on and how to behave better. So, to Aristotle, ethics is preliminary to politics. Politics is more important. Ethics understands the nature of individual happiness. But politics is answering questions such as how specifically the human good is to be pursued within the city. How to balance the good of one person against another. And the city for them was like a state, right? We can translate it as a state too, because they didn't have a state in our sense of the word. The biggest state they had, like Athens, was just a large city, and not even very large, to be honest. Athens, I think, had like 40,000 people at the time. So to them, that was a state. To us, of course, today, that would not seem even like a big city, but different times. So here is the quote. Knowledge of the good seems to be the concern of the most authoritative science, the highest master science. And this is obviously the science of politics, because it lays down which of the sciences there should be in cities and which each class of persons should learn and up to what level. So the main question is this: what is good life for human beings? Same question as probably we all wonder about today. What is a good life? How should we live? What is the relations between happiness and virtue? He takes this practical approach and tries to approach it in a very practical way. So he says there are three types of life we can actually pursue to achieve that. Life of pleasure. That would be one way, right? if you want to achieve maximum pleasure in your life. The other thing is life of politics. Politics is different from pleasure, right? Politicians do not really seek pleasure, at least for the most part. At least not in the same sense as most of us. What do politicians mostly do and enjoy? Yes, power. Power, control. So that's not the same thing as pleasure. Of course, they may feel pleasure while they're doing it, but not in the same sense as we feel pleasure when we have a tasty meal. That is a somewhat different type of pleasure. And finally, life of contemplation, philosophy. That is the third way. But he doesn't think money would do it. Why do you think he dismisses money? Well, money is instrumental, and you can use it for any of these things, right? You can use money to achieve pleasure, you can use money to achieve political position, and you can use money even to be contemplating while you have enough income not to worry about the job. So money is instrumental, but this is actually final goals which you can pursue in your life. So in that sense, money doesn't qualify. So then he looks at all three of them, and he dismisses pleasure right away. He says masses see happiness as pleasure, but this is quite slavish, like fit for cattle. This is pleasure. If all we wanted in life is pleasure, we would not be different from other animals. That to him seems so base and unexciting that that cannot be truly a goal of life, or at least somebody who is well educated and smart, capable person. Then honor and wealth. Honor and wealth, he says, well, that is what a lot of people pursue, but there is a problem with that because it depends on the opinion of other people. What do they think about you, rather than on yourself? You may or may not achieve it, and then others will decide whether you deserve it. So it's a little bit, again, more of an instrumental thing rather than final goal. Final goal in this case has to be something else. He also dismisses this idea of the good, the form of the good, which Plato suggests. There's actually a famous quote there in Nicomachean Ethics when he talks about it, and he says, Plato is a friend of mine, but sometimes, the truth is more important than friends. So basically, yeah, I'm a student of Plato. He's a great guy. But I disagree about that, and there's nothing I can do about that. So he says that the form of good is just some sort of an abstraction. They cannot be form of good because all goods are different. When we talk about good meal and good life, that can't be the same thing. So good is not the right word to talk about anything, and there's no such thing as just ultimate good. He does not think that what is worthy of the choice by itself is not something which is instrumental to something else. He thinks there should be one thing which we all can agree is the ultimate goal of life. What do you think it is? Is there anything we can all agree is the ultimate goal? What do we all want to be?
Rich.
Huh? Happy. Happiness. That's exactly it. The happiness is something we all pursue. We may have different understanding of what it is, but surely we all pursue it. It would be a strange person who doesn't want to be happy. Even if somebody is a masochist or something, right? They enjoy being tortured. But they do it because it makes them happy. So they have this weird, twisted understanding of happiness. Nonetheless, they are pursuing happiness too. So that is the only thing which is unconditional. It's not secondary to anything else. It's the good in itself. That is the most important one. In fact, Greeks actually, that's another weird thing again. For the 10th time or whatever, I have to say Greek word is not the same as English word. We use the word happiness. They use the word eudaimonia. And eudaimonia actually is not exactly happiness. Daimon, I don't know if you guys heard it, it's like demon, right? Daimon is the guardian angel of a type. And eudaimon is a good guardian angel. So in that sense, what it really means is to have fortune in life, as if guardian angel takes care of you. So that's what Greeks meant when they say eudaimonia, but we translate it as happiness because that's the closest English word to translate it. But what is it? What is happiness? What exactly do we understand when we say we want to be happy? So, first of all, he is again dismissing pleasures of the bodily type. He says it's not an amusement. Happiness, therefore, does not lie in amusement. It would indeed be strange if the end were amusement, and one were to take trouble and suffer hardships all one's life in order to amuse oneself. For in a word, everything that we choose for the sake of something else except happiness, which is an end. Now, to exert oneself and work for the sake of amusement seems silly and utterly childish. Right? So, like, if you suffer through your life, you try to achieve something only in order for you to basically just sit there and watch Netflix on TV or something like that. That seems a little silly. That seems like it's not really worth the trouble, right? Especially since eventually what will happen to all of us? We will die, right? So like so much trouble just to die. There surely must be something more than that. So couple more Greek words. One thing Greeks thought is that there is a typical human occupation, something which characteristically human activity. So the word in Greek is ergon. Ergon, everything has an ergon. So ergon of a knife is the ability to cut. That's what knife is for, right? Ergon of a lyre player is to play a lyre. But what about human being? Does a human being have characteristic activity? If we had to pick one characteristic activity of a human being, what would that be? Because like if you think about eating food, well obviously there are plenty of animals that eat and enjoy food. But is there anything which is special to us? And no other animal does that. Yeah. Cook it, but then again we still eat it. Like we cook it to make it a little bit tastier. I guess they don't cook it, but they still enjoy it. In fact, we eat some of the food raw and it also is very tasty. It's just certain types of food is better off cooked. Like you don't cook oysters. So to say that characteristic human activity is cooking food would be a little bit strange. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Empathy?
Huh?
Empathy?
Is empathy an activity though? Like it's not really an activity. It's more of a state. Yeah.
That would work.
Okay, well that's actually an interesting look at it. The fact that we work. But do you think it's our characteristic activity, working? Well, it could be. And in fact, Karl Marx thinks that it is. And actually, when we make it to Marx, we'll talk about that. But Aristotle thought about something else. And it actually is related to, remember, he is unmoved mover, who was doing what? But what was he doing? Thinking. You already said it before. Thinking, yes. That is something which is characteristically human. The human function, according to Aristotle, is the contemplation ability to think. That is something which is specific to human beings. So, arete, human arete, would be doing it well. Doing it well. So if there is such thing as a characteristic activity for a human being and you do it well, then that would be our arete. Now if you think it is thinking, then you would have to be thinking well. You would have to do it. Why would it be thinking? Well, thinking in the sense of, I guess, you may say animals have some thought, but they don't have thoughts in the way we do in language, right? We can actually make plans, we can deliberate with ourselves and reminiscent of the past and so on. This is our thinking. Animals cannot do that. Animal cannot just plan to go fishing tomorrow. Animal cannot remember what they did a month ago and so on. Maybe if animal sees something like familiar, they will remember that at that moment. But we can just do recollections out of nowhere. We can just sit there and start thinking, what did I do a year ago? Oh, right, that was pretty cool. And so on, which animals cannot do. Okay, so the virtue, the arete, is important, but it's not enough to have virtue. You actually have to be able to practice it. Because we can say even a person who's asleep could be virtuous, but they're not doing anything. So life actually should, happy life should be an activity. You should be doing something in order to achieve virtue. Virtuous life, to achieve this type of activity, would be virtuous, would be happy. And that brings him back to parts of the soul, just like for Plato. That actually plays a role here too. And just like Plato, he divides the soul into different parts. There is a rational part, which is, by the way, an immortal part. Not immortal in the sense that, like, the soul which never dies. But in what sense is the rational power immortal? Well, if you write a book or otherwise transmit your thoughts to other people, that doesn't die with you. Right? After you die, other people also remember that. And that's how it continues throughout. So in that sense, it is immortal. Our intellectual part. And there's also non-rational part, which has vegetative, nutrition, growth, responsible for this, and appetitive and desiring part, which drives us towards certain things. So that virtue would be actually try to actualize these parts of the soul and give them enough of food to exist. Intellectual virtues such as wisdom, judgment, practical wisdom, and virtues of character such as courage, generosity, temperance, and actually justice as well. So all this stuff is what you need to keep in a correct balance. So which ends are worth it to pursue? First of all, ask yourself, what is happiness? You have to understand what is happiness. Because whatever you do then should be to achieve this happiness. The second thing is to understand the role of virtue in happiness. Why do you need virtue in order for you to achieve happiness? And then apply it to your life. And that way you will be happy. Can only do it with experience. We cannot just talk about it and then you immediately will start doing it, but experience is very helpful. So what's the purpose of human life? Let's look at the quote here. We take this kind of life to be activity of the soul and actions in accordance with reason, because reason is something only human beings have. So thinking, reasoning, animals do not have it. And characteristic activity of the good person is to carry this out well and nobly. And a characteristic activity to be accomplished well when it is accomplished in accordance with appropriate virtue. Then, if this is so, the human good turns out to be activity of the soul in accordance with virtue, and if there are several virtues, in accordance with the best and most complete. Okay, so what does he think about virtue? It is a state of character. Now, morally good person is not simply the one who performs morally right action, but also the one who has the right disposition towards these actions. In other words, delights in virtuous actions and is vexed on vicious ones, as a musical man enjoys beautiful tunes when it played painted bad ones, right? So, in other words, not only should you pretend to be virtuous, but you should actually genuinely enjoy being virtuous. And if you see something which is not virtuous, you would feel like, musician who hears this really bad musical sounds. Like, I don't know, the musical instrument being used in a way that the sound, and then you'd be like, yeah. So that is how you should be throughout your entire life. You can only do it with practice. If you keep on doing it, how do you think we can obtain it through practice? Where would you obtain it? Who would you get it from? Let's put it this way. Which is who? Usually, for most of us.
A tutor or teacher.
Tutor or teacher, you think? How about your parents? Where's your parents? Usually the parents. The teacher comes second, right, or third. Teachers could be different, and you may not even listen to them as much. But your parents is the first group. Your parents, when you grow up, should actually install this virtue into you. And if they don't do that, you may go astray, and then the teacher's not going to change that. And we all saw that, and I'm sure you guys saw that. If somebody is already wicked and they go to school or something, is teacher going to change them? Probably not. But if parents do it from the very, very young age, from the very beginning, that's when you can really have an effect. So that would be the goal. And the question becomes, can't vicious person be happy? Isn't it possible to achieve happiness through vicious actions, through evil actions? Well, Aristotle actually allows that. He says, to a certain degree, but that's not going to be as good. The type of happiness which you can achieve with virtue is so much better. And that's why you should not be a vicious person. That is simply for your own benefit. Because your life will be better, you'll be happier. And you can kind of see his point, right? Look at all these evil people. Like, I don't know, Hitler. Do they seem happy to you? I don't know anybody like this who would be happy. I think even if they achieve a lot in their life, and even if they die while they are still famous or powerful and so on, there seems to be something still kind of wrong with that. I'm sure that at some point, even they themselves realize that their life is not that great. And that is the problem. So how do you, in general, do it? He connects it to the mean, the mean of virtue. He's saying virtue is concerned with passions and actions in which excess is a form of failure, and so is defect, while the intermediate is praised and is form of success. So in every type of virtue, there is a certain mean between two extremes. You can have too much and too little, with some exceptions, but for the most part. So this is the table from the book. If you read the book, for example, confidence in facing danger. You actually can have too much of it, in which case it will be rashness. You are too brave. Or you can have too little of it. It would be cowardice. But the correct balance between the two is courage. Enjoying pleasure. Nothing wrong with enjoying pleasure, but if you're enjoying too much, self-indulgent. On the other hand, if you like really austere and don't enjoy pleasures, don't want to have any pleasures, you've been puritanical. So there is a temperance, which is the correct balance of that, right? Giving money. If you don't give money to anybody at all, you are stingy. But if you give too much, you are vulgar. So the correct balance is generosity. Truth about oneself. You should be telling truth about oneself. But if you're doing it too much, you're boastful. If you're doing it too little, self-depreciation. But the correct amount is self-honesty. Of course, there are some actions which don't have the golden mean. Like, for example, murder, there's no like correct balance of murder. Not too much murder, not too little murder. No, murder is always wrong. Adultery, certain things are always wrong. But with things which can be virtuous, like these ones here, you have to know this correct balance, because any of them could be basically go wrong. And this mean is determined by practical wisdom. It's not like you can just, add it up and divide it by 2 or something. No, it's not mathematical mean. It is something which you should really, again, when you are living your life, understand and practice. What is the correct amount of generosity, for example? What would be too much, what would be too little, and so on. So virtuous person kind of understands all these things, learns them, and then you determine it by this rational principle. By that principle, which man of practical wisdom would determine. So you may think that it's not maybe very helpful, because unless you're told what it is, you don't know it, but that's why he's saying, like, this is not something you can just teach somebody like mathematics. You have to live your life and understand it. In general, that's a good principle. But how to apply this principle, you can only know from your own experience. So in summary, a good person, a virtuous person, would be carefully following reason, because that's our most important quality. Desire the right thing. Have well-formed character. Know the proper goals in human life. Can estimate how to achieve those goals in practice. And have most experience in making tough moral decisions. So that's kind of something, again, from childhood. You have to learn all these things from childhood. For some people it's already too late, but for some people it's not. So what is the best form of life then? The highest and most satisfying form of happiness is linked to what is the very best within us, the most important activity. So what do you think? What's the best form of life, he thinks, for a human being? Take a guess. Well, that's a little vague, but more specifically, in terms of profession, let's put it as a profession. Well, don't you see a catch here? I mean, who was Aristotle?
A philosopher.
There you go! A philosopher! Of course, it is kind of self-serving a little bit, but I guess he has a point. And that would be the life of rational contemplation. Like philosophy. That's the best form of life. Why? Reason is the best, is the part of us which most fully expresses our humanity, right? That's our most characteristic activity. Animals can do it, we can do it. We can engage in reason continuously in the midst of life's other engagements. Rational contemplation is self-sufficient activity, for we can engage in it on our own. We don't need other people. It is the one activity we engage in for its own sake and not for tangible results it brings. It can bring good results, but you can also enjoy it on its own. And contemplation imitates the activity of God, the unmoved mover, right? It's good enough for him, surely it's good enough for us. In that sense, we become like gods too. And then Aristotle builds it towards politics. Politics to him is the most important thing. And it also is very interesting and very influential. His work on politics will be rediscovered in the already, 13th century or something, and will be influential for many thinkers. So he thinks ethics is instrumental to politics. Politics is more important. Our purpose is to consider what form of political community is best of all for those who are most able to realize their ideal in life. Why do you think he connects it immediately to politics and to political community? Can anybody live by themselves?
Yeah.
Yeah, like where?
In the middle of nowhere.
Can you?
Is that like one house? I don't know. I think it's in like the Netherlands, and they literally like live in the
Well,
center of rolling hills.
they are far away from people, but I mean, they probably still connect to these people somehow. If you are completely disconnected from people, I guess you can leave it. But one question is, would you be happy with this life? Probably not. I would imagine that one getting really on your nerves very soon. At the very least, you need the internet, right? So you could occasionally look at Facebook or something. If you're completely disconnected from all other human beings, I don't know, in a few years you'll go insane probably. Like literally go crazy. And I certainly don't see you being very happy. So you do need other people. And for us, it also is not a possibility. I mean, where are we going to live like this? This entire world now is penetrated with people. You're not going to get away from them even if you want to. So don't try to get away from them. You figure out a way to live with them which makes you happy. Because that is necessity of life. And that is where political community comes in. Because there are questions, what's the best way for us to live together? How should we organize society in which we live? And even though one person cannot do it, right, unless you are the king or something, you cannot reorganize the whole society, but you have a little contribution. At least you should have idea about that. Like, what do I personally want? Do I want it to be a monarchy, or do I want it to be a democracy? And which way then will I orient my actions in my own life? So Aristotle also talks a lot about nature. Natural way to live, and he thinks that these things actually are natural for a human being. First of all, household. He thinks household is a natural state for a human being because you have to have like a couple and children. That's how you live as a human being. Like, it's possible to live without them, but it's better to live with them, and most of us, if not all of us, have them. Right? Parents, brothers, sisters, children, household. Then village. It's kind of form of several households. And he thinks that historically at first there were obviously no villages, but then we started forming them because it is again natural for us as human beings to be with other people. And finally, state or polis, which is more like a city for them. But a state is a big organization of many villages all together in this kind of a big society, and the state exists for good life. That's the idea. That's why we started to organize with all these other people. We didn't do it because we hate all of them. If we hated them back then, especially, right, in these early days of civilization, we could have lived on our own. One hunter could have gone into the mountains with his, I don't know, hammer or something and like hunt bison all by himself. But would it work well? Probably not. Because I mean, it's much harder, right? The bison is pretty big, you are pretty small. How many bisons are you going to be able to kill before they kill you? So you need other people. You needed other people back then even more than now. Now at least if you're talking about building a house, right, you already kind of have an idea about getting some stuff from other people, like the bricks, the wood, the ideas how to build houses. But imagine, I don't know, 100,000 years ago, there were already human beings. Could you at that time live by yourself and build a house? Probably not. You would definitely not survive in this way. So he thinks man by nature is a political animal. So by nature we are meant to live with other people. The state is for us even prior to family, because the state is something which we all organize into. And our only life in community with other people is truly virtuous life, worthy of eudaimonia, happiness. You cannot achieve it on your own, and you shouldn't try to achieve it on your own, because you're just going to make your life more difficult, and you're not going to achieve it. He actually has this striking metaphor. He says, only a god or a beast can live outside of society. So if you are either a god or a beast, you can live on your own. If you're a human being, no. A city-state is not a sharing of common location. Doesn't exist for the purpose of preventing mutual wrongdoing and exchanging goods, which is, by the way, how many people thought about it. But it's more than that. Rather, while this must be present, of course, you should have this protection, mutual protection, and so on. if indeed there is to be a city-state, when all of them are present, there is still not yet a city. But only when households and families live well as a community whose end is a complete and self-sufficient life. So when we all kind of achieve this higher level of truly enjoying each other and helping each other to achieve happiness, that's when we truly have this working ideal community. He disagrees with Plato about this whole republic thing, by the way. Remember what we talked about? He thought the whole thing is atrocious. The idea of taking children away from their parents, he was like, that is crazy. That is just insane. Who would even do that? Nobody's going to do it. The idea of not having any property, he thought if you don't have any property, you'll probably be even more jealous of other people than if you had property. You would be more like difficult to live with. You would suffer more and you would hate other people, and that actually can create more tension than anything else. If you take people and take away all their property, you get this just such a miserable bunch that they'll be a lot worse than people who have property, even if it is uneven distribution of property. So he completely disagreed with this ideal city which Plato had. So how do you achieve happiness in that city? Set up the best laws which are meant to achieve maximum happiness. Figure out what are these best laws. He actually looked at all the constitutions of the period of time. There's many of these constitutions of different other cities, the way they live, and tried to figure out which ones are better. And obviously, he said there's no ideal state. There is no state which is just the perfect one. But there are better ones and worse ones. So what is the ideal government according to Aristotle? Actually, he has an interesting discussion of that. He has the best type of government would be actually kingship, to have one king, but only if this king is good. If you have one person who is great leader, that is the best type of government. But he also immediately says it almost never happens. Right? So then what's the second best? The second best is what he called aristocracy. But remember, Aristotle didn't mean aristocracy in the sense of like noble birth. It just meant the better group of better people, the more virtuous people, the people who are better educated, who know better what virtue is, and so on. And even if there's more than one, if they are in charge, is the best. But what is the worst type of ideal government? This is worst of the best. The worst of the best would be like the type of democracy, polity. Similar to democracy, but without distortion from the poor and lazy. So poor and lazy are not in charge, but majority is in charge. So if you cannot achieve kingship and aristocracy, this type of democracy will do. On the other hand, when you look at the worst type of government, similar picture. What is the worst of the worst type of government according to Aristotle? Tyranny. If you have one king but he is a bad person, that's the worst you can do. So if you have one king and he is the best person, it's the best you can do. But if you have one king and he is the worst person, that's the worst you can do. What is the second worst? Oligarchy. That's when rich people are in charge. Like more than one, but they are wealthy, and so they will be pulling the blanket to themselves, trying to get all the money. And the third, least worst of the three is again democracy. Why? Because in democracy, the ochlos, the poor and the lazy, will be in charge, because majority of people are always, he thinks, poor and lazy. So if you decide with the majority will be doing it in the interest of the poor and lazy. So again, you see this interesting thing. It actually is something which Churchill said, democracy is the worst type of a government, but it's the best one we know. It's a similar thing here. Democracy is bad, but these other things are so much worse that you have to stick with democracy. So that kind of comes down to a similar thing. If you can somehow select the best king, that would be fantastic. But you can't. And then there's a chance you get the worst king, and it will be the worst situation ever. So you don't want to do that.